they found out the hard way. I want to start there with that sentence before we go anywhere else in this reading, because I think it captures the specific quality of what has happened more honestly than any gentler framing would. This is not a situation where someone reconsidered their position thoughtfully and arrived at a more accurate understanding of your value through a process of calm reflection. This is a situation where reality intervened, where the specific consequences of having dismissed, underestimated, or failed to appropriately honor something essential in you arrived in a form that could not be rationalized away, minimized, or blamed on anything other than the choice that produced it. They found out, and found out is the right phrase, because this particular understanding did not arrive gently. It arrived with the specific, irreversible quality of information that can only be received after it is too late to act on it the way you would have acted on it if you had understood it before. And now they are sitting with what they understand in the specific, uncomfortable, slightly stunned way of someone who played something out and arrived at the ending, and the ending was not what they assumed it would be, not because they did not have enough information, because they had the information and they chose not to fully believe it. They chose to believe instead that you would remain indefinitely available to something that was not adequately honoring what you brought to it, that you would absorb indefinitely, that the standard you have for yourself was negotiable under sufficient pressure or in the presence of sufficient other things that were compelling or convenient. You are not negotiable. They know that now. Let me show you what the cards confirmed about all of this. Let me describe what I felt the moment I opened this energy, because the initial impressions were immediate and specific, and I want to share them before we go anywhere near the cards. I felt the very particular quality of a reckoning that has settled rather than one that is still in process, not the acute, sharp edge of something that has just happened. The heavier, quieter, more permanent quality of something that has finished happening and is now simply present in a way that is not going to change back. The emotional texture of something irreversible that has been fully absorbed rather than still being resisted. I also felt underneath that settled quality something that I want to name carefully because I think it is the most honest thing in this entire reading. I felt regret, not the performative, self-protective kind that is really a form of protest against having been wrong. The genuine, undefended, this is what I actually feel kind of regret that arrives when someone understands fully and without the cushion of alternative interpretations that they had something real and they treated it as though it were less than it was. That regret is real, and it is sitting in the specific, heavy way of something that has no resolution available to it, because what was lost is not the kind of thing that can simply be retrieved by correcting the error. The first card in this reading arrived in the position representing what this person failed to understand before reality corrected them, the specific misconception that drove the choices that produced this particular outcome. And I want to describe it with precision because the precision is the point. This card shows a figure standing between two different paths, extending cups in both directions. The quality of someone who has access to multiple options and who has been operating from the assumption that the options will remain available indefinitely regardless of how they are engaged with. This is the card of someone who has been doing the specific common human thing of treating genuine, substantial value as though it has the elasticity of something provisional rather than the specific limits of something real. What I am reading in this card about what this person failed to understand is something I want to name directly. They thought you were one of their options, not the only option, not even, at certain moments, the primary one. One of the things they could return to when other things had run their course, when the other cups had been emptied or proved themselves unsatisfying, when the comparison that was always running had finally arrived at you as the conclusion it was always going to arrive at. What they did not understand was that you are not that kind of option. You are not the kind of thing that holds itself in reserve, remaining available and patient and fundamentally unchanged while someone works through their other considerations and eventually finds their way back. The specific, particular quality of what you bring is not compatible with being treated as though it is infinitely patient with its own undervaluing. There is a threshold, and they crossed it without registering that they were crossing it, without understanding that the version of you that was still available on one side of the threshold would not be available in the same form on the other. The second card arrived in the position representing the specific moment of the reckoning, what actually happened that produced the understanding they had been resisting. And I want to describe this carefully because the specificity of what occurred matters. This card shows a figure lying in the specific posture of a complete and comprehensive ending. The imagery not of something that has paused or changed direction, but of something that has conclusively finished, the suit that governs the mind and its relationship to truth, and the number that represents the absolute completion, the maximum possible intensity, the specific point at which something has gone as far as it can possibly go in its current direction. What I am reading in this card about the moment of reckoning is something I want to name honestly. Something ended completely, not in a preliminary way that could be revisited and renegotiated once the intensity of the moment had passed, in the specific, final way that belongs to something that has genuinely run out of road. And the person who is sitting with this now is sitting with the full weight of what completion means when the thing that has completed was something they had not adequately valued while it was available to them. I also want to speak to the imagery of this card's ending with care because I think it deserves to be received in its full truth rather than softened. The Ten of Swords is one of the most unambiguous cards in the deck about the nature of what it depicts. It is not uncertain, it is not provisional, it is final. And what that finality means in the context of your reading is that whatever this person now understands about your essentialness to them, they are understanding it in a context where the understanding cannot simply be exchanged for a correction. The ending has already happened. The understanding arrived after rather than before. I also want to speak to something about what this card tends to reveal about the interior experience of someone who has found out the hard way rather than the easy way. The hard way, the specific kind of understanding that arrives through direct experience of consequences rather than through advanced comprehension of the situation, tends to produce a quality of knowing that is considerably more permanent than the kind arrived at through reasoning alone. This person is not going to forget what they understand now. The understanding has a specific embodied, felt quality to it that comes from the experience of its opposite, from having operated as though the reverse were true, and then confronting the concrete result of that operating. That kind of knowing changes the way a person sees things going forward, not just in relation to you, but in relation to their own pattern of assessing what they have and how they treat it. The lesson, in other words, is genuinely being learned. Whether the learning is of any practical use to them, given what it costs to produce it, is a separate question. Does this feel like it is mapping onto something specific, Virgo? The quality of someone who has recently arrived at an understanding of what you meant to them that they could not access while you were fully available to them. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear what this is landing on for you. The third card arrived in the position representing what this person is now, specifically understanding that they were not able to understand before the content of the opened eyes. The title of this reading describes, and this is the card I want to give the most space to. This card shows a crowned figure at the absolute pinnacle of their element, the fullest possible embodiment of what the earth element produces in its most developed, most established, most genuinely real form. The court figure of the pentacle suit at its highest position, the card of mastery, so thorough it has become simply who someone is rather than something they are performing. This is the card of genuine, substantive, irreplaceable value in its most complete expression. What I am reading in this card about what this person has now understood is something I want to say plainly and without qualification. They understand now that you are not replaceable, that the specific combination of qualities you bring, the particular way your intelligence and your care and your precision and your genuine depth of engagement all operate together in one person, is not something that exists elsewhere in a form that serves the same function. They made the specific, common, costly mistake of assuming that what you offered was sufficiently generic that it could be found again once they had decided to look for it elsewhere or to not prioritize finding it in you. They have discovered through experience rather than through advance understanding that it cannot. I also want to speak to what the earth element of this card tells me about this specific nature of what was lost from their perspective. The earth element is the element of what actually exists in the material world, of what is real and enduring and tangible rather than theoretical. What they have lost is not an idea of something or a feeling about something. It is something that had real material presence in their actual life, something that was structurally present in how their daily experience worked, and the absence of it is being felt in exactly the material, structural, real-life texture way that the earth element is about. Inhale with me, Virgo, because the fourth card is the one that speaks most directly to something I think you need to hear about your own position in this dynamic. This card shows a figure standing at the highest achievable point, wand raised toward a blazing sun, the quality of someone who has arrived at a genuine high point and who is inhabiting it with the full, embodied, unambiguous quality of someone who is exactly where they are supposed to be. This is the card of someone who has climbed something real and who is standing at the top of it, not as an accomplishment to be proud of in some performative sense, but simply as the natural, accurate expression of where their genuine capability has brought them. What I am sensing this card is describing about your current position is something I want to say directly. While this person has been having their reckoning with what they failed to understand about you, you have not been waiting for them to have it. You have been building. You have been becoming more of what you already were. You have been moving in the direction that was always yours to move in, continuing the accumulation of genuine, substantive, real-world capability. That is the specific thing that makes you essential rather than simply desirable. The irony of the situation, and I want to name it specifically because I think Virgo deserves to have this named, is that The person who failed to understand your essentialness while you were available to them is now attempting to arrive at that understanding in a period when the version of you they would be engaging with is even more fully developed, even more established, even more genuinely the pinnacle of its element thing that the third card describes than you were when they first failed to see it. Time has not stood still waiting for their eyes to open. Time has been working in your favor. I want to address something about how Virgo tends to hold the specific situation this reading is describing, because I think it is worth naming directly. You do not feel triumphant about this, or at least the triumphant feeling, if it is present at all, is considerably more complicated than triumphant. There is probably some satisfaction in the confirmation of something you understood before it was confirmed, the specific, quiet vindication of having accurately assessed a situation that the other person was insisting on misassessing. But there is also something else present, something that Virgo tends to carry in situations like this that is neither grief exactly nor satisfaction, but is the specific thoughtful weight of someone who genuinely did not want this outcome, who would have preferred the other person to understand what they had while they had it, rather than arriving at understanding through the specific costly mechanism of its loss. You are not a person who enjoys watching someone have a reckoning, even when the reckoning is deserved, even when you were the one who was not adequately valued, and the reckoning is the specific consequence of that failure to value. There is something in your genuine nature that would rather the lesson had been learned without the loss needing to occur. That quality, that genuine preference for everyone's well-being, including the well-being of someone who did not adequately honor yours, is part of what made you essential in the first place. And it is part of what I want to acknowledge explicitly, because I think it goes unacknowledged too often in situations like this one. You are not required to feel simple things about complicated situations. The complicated feeling is the accurate one. The fifth card arrived in the position of what this situation is pointing toward going forward, and I want to describe it without the expectation that it goes in any particular direction, because the direction is entirely yours to determine. This card shows a great wheel turning, the ascending and descending figures on either side, the principle governing the whole mechanism at its apex. The specific quality of this card in this position is the impersonal quality, the "this is how it works" quality, the reminder that what goes around tends to come around, not as moral lesson, but as structural consequence of the way that energy and choice and their results tend to move through the world. What the wheel is pointing toward in the context of your specific situation is not a predetermined outcome. The wheel does not predetermine. What it does is point toward the specific direction of current movement. And the current movement in this dynamic has a specific direction that I want to name honestly. The person who did not understand your essentialness has arrived at that understanding. Whether and how they act on it, whether they attempt to re-enter what they failed to value, and how that attempt is made, and whether you choose to receive it if it comes, all of that is genuinely open. What is not open is the fact that the understanding has arrived, that the eyes have opened, that the specific thing the title of this reading describes has actually occurred in this person's experience, with the full, irreversible quality of something that cannot be unknown once it has been genuinely known. What you do with that reality is the only question that remains, and it is entirely, comprehensively, absolutely yours. I also want to speak to something about the timing of what the wheel tends to produce in situations like this one, because I think it is relevant for how you hold what comes next. The wheel turning in the way it has for this person is not a single moment of understanding followed by a return to ordinary life unchanged. It is the beginning of a period of genuine reorganization in how they understand themselves and their choices and what they prioritize going forward. The reckoning produces not just a conclusion about you specifically, but a broader revision of how they assess what they have and whether they have been treating the genuinely valuable things in their life with the quality of attention, care those things actually deserve. In that sense, the opened eyes are not only looking at you, they are looking at a pattern that produced this outcome. And that broader looking tends to produce a period of quieter, more inward, more honest living for a while before any external movement becomes available. Before I close, I want to say something specifically about being essential, because I think that word, which appears in the title of this reading, deserves more than a passing reference. Essential is not the same as important. Important means it matters. Essential means it cannot be substituted. It means the specific function or quality or presence is one that does not exist in a form that can simply be found elsewhere and installed in the same way. It means that the absence of it produces a gap that other things cannot fill because the other things are not this specific thing. You are essential in this sense, and the person whose eyes have opened knows it now in the specific, felt, cannot be denied, because the absence is making it undeniable way of someone who is experiencing the gap rather than anticipating it. That knowledge does not create an obligation in you. You are not required to make yourself available again simply because someone has arrived at an accurate understanding of your value. You are not required to accept a late recognition as equivalent to an early one. You are not required to allow the reckoning to serve as a credit against the cost of the choices that produced it. What you are required to do, if we are speaking about requirements at all, is exactly what you have always done. Continue being exactly what you are. Essential, whether anyone is currently recognizing it or not. If this reading names something you have been living through, the specific quality of someone who failed to see what they had and who has now arrived at that understanding through the specific, costly mechanism of its loss, please share it with a Virgo who might need to hear that the understanding arriving late does not mean it has to be acted on anyone else's timeline. And leave a comment. I want to hear how this has unfolded in your actual life. I read every single comment and I hold what is shared in this space with genuine care long after this video ends. Until next time, Virgo, they found out the hard way. They know now. What happens next belongs entirely to you, and you are under absolutely no obligation to make it easy for them.